What's going on, everybody? Gentleman94 here. Welcome back to the 105. Today, this is build day number 15. And let's go ahead and take a look at what we're going to be doing today. We're working a little bit here on the munitions, on the bombs. Now, I've been going over and over in my brain what I want to do with these because they require a yellow strip around the nose of each of the bombs. I don't really feel like painting them because it would take a lot of masking and a lot of very, very delicate and precise measurements, and I don't really want to do that. So I was looking through the decals and I found that Hasegawa gave us some decals in its weapon set, and Hobby Boss has given us some decals for their bombs. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the yellow decals that came out of the kit, and we're going to go ahead and put the yellow strips on through that process. Because I don't really want to airbrush these. It would take so long to do, and there are 6 bombs on the main center line plus 1 on each wing. That's 8 bombs we have to fool with. I don't really want to do that for each bomb. So instead, we're going to go ahead and coat the tips of all the bombs in the future. And I do this because I was always taught to put decals onto a glossy surface, which didn't make a lot of sense when I was first starting building. But now that I've done it a few times, well, more than a few times, it does make sense because the decals themselves are glossy. They come in a glossy carrier film. Now, once you put them onto the glossy surface, they will adhere better than a flat surface, and you can go ahead and overcoat with a flat and you can bring them down. So we're just going to use some straight future right out of the bottle. No need to thin it. I mean, you can if you want, but no need to thin it. And we're spraying at about 15 psi. We're going to coat each one of these bombs with future. Now they're going to wiggle around a little bit, but if my tape performs as well today as it has in the past, it should stay. Alright, so we're going to get the other side of these, and we want to be as thorough as we can on these bombs. We really want to concentrate around the nose of each of the bombs because that's where we're going to have the decals. The decals are going to be 2 pieces, top and bottom, right and left, however you want to see it. There'll be 2 overlapping yellow strips, and that's not going to be easy, but it's going to be a standard decaling procedure. Another way you could have done this, you could have painted the entire nose a yellow color, and then painstakingly taken a very thin strip of Tamiya tape and tape exactly the area that you want to stay yellow, and then overcoat the entire thing with the bomb green. While we have the airbrush out and filled with future, I thought it would take an opportunity to go ahead and overcoat this Seafire Mark III that I've been working on for seems like ever. Anyone out there has seen my introduction to decaling, you'll notice this exact plane, and this plane has been sitting in my display case for a good long while. And the reason I haven't finished it is because I just haven't had the drive to finish it. But since I pulled out yellow paint to go ahead and give it a test run to see if I could paint the bombs, decided not to. But since I pulled out the yellow paint, I took the opportunity to airbrush each tip of these black propeller blades for the Seafire Mark III. And that was a couple days ago, and now that they're dry, I figured, you know what, I'm going to coat it with future to go ahead and match the rest of the aircraft. Probably come back and do a little weathering on it. It's a good looking kit though. Yeah, had it out. Why not? Alright, back to the 105 now. Went ahead and I moved the bombs out of the way, and they're going to be drying for at least 24 to 48 hours. We're going to now come back and we're going to touch up the spine of the aircraft. We had a little bit of a seam issue here, and we've removed the step between the seams, and we have faired them over. So now we're going to come back through, and I'm just going to very lightly, with one of my mixes here, we're going to just coat the very spine of the rear tail, the horizontal stabilizer. We also wanted to touch up the side of the intake here. There was a little bit of a line that was left when we were overcoating the brown. So we want to make sure to kind of touch that up a little bit. Nothing too much. I don't really mind if a little brown shows up beneath it because after all, these guys were painted in the field. I'm pretty sure they didn't have rigorous, standards. They probably still got it done to get it in the air. So not too concerned about that. Now, while that is all kind of drying, I wanted to take some time to put on the main landing gear wheels. Now, I haven't done this yet, and there's been a good reason for that. The Hobby Boss F-105 has very long, spindly main gears, which of course could make for a kind of wonky stance. Now, though, we're going to be putting the wheels onto the kit, and the thing about the wheels is the axle is a little bit smaller than the hole for the axle on the wheel. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using super glue. Now, typically with plastic to plastic connections, I usually use, say, like plastic welder or Tamiya extra thin cement. but that melts plastic and fuses it together. But since this is actually a little larger than what it should be, I need to go ahead and fill in some room around it. So I'm going to be using some super glue. Super glue doesn't bond plastic like it does for, say, plastic welder or the Tamiya extra thin cement. I use this as a little bit of a gap filler and also as a glue. I think it's going to go over well. We also forgot to remove the front masking that I had done for the inside of the front gear bay. So we're going to pull that out now. And as you can see, I mean, it worked really well. I put them pretty far down in there. So we use our tweezers and just pop those out. There we go. Yeah, much better. Okay, so now we're going to move on to probably one of the more tedious things to do, masking. We have two areas in the front nose cone here that are required to be silver. We have the gun port for the 20mm Vulcan cannon, and we have a strip of metal that seems to sit between the nose cone and the fuselage. Now, seeing as both of these areas have to be a shiny metal, we have to go ahead and paint that. And I don't want to brush paint it. First off, I don't trust my hands in terms of steadiness for brush painting. And two, I don't want any brush strokes or any sort of marks. So the best way to avoid that is to use an airbrush for me. So that's what I'm going to be doing. And in order to make sure that I don't airbrush the crap out of the paint job, I need to go ahead and mask. So we're going to be using the Tamiya masking tape again, and there are different sizes you can get. I think this is the, I want to say 6mm. And we're going to take a piece of this tape here, and I've actually pre-cut these. This is one strip of Tamiya masking tape, and I used a straight edge, and I cut different lengths of thin strips of tape. And I also cut them in different segments as well, so I have varying sizes and varying lengths. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take each individual piece, and I'm just going to pull it off my cutting board here and place it very carefully onto the model. And I want to make sure that this sits right in the correct area. And I'm using the panel lines for the gun as kind of my guide. And I want this to be silver, and I don't want any overspray, so I want to be very careful with how I do this. And this is a little lengthy operation. I mean, talking about masking canopies being a lengthy operation. Masking gun ports or very thin strips of metal, kind of tedious. So as you can see here, we have the front gun port masked. Everything around the 20mm Vulcan cannon bay is taped off with your basic Tamiya tape. Now, in order to make sure we don't hit the rest of it, we're going to cover that with blue tape, because that's cheaper to buy than the Tamiya tape. We also need to go ahead and mask off the front nose area here. We want a thin strip of metal between the black and the green. So to do that, again, we're going to use Tamiya masking tape, cut into thin strips. And we're going to position this and just kind of prop it up against my modeling table here. And we want to use the panel line, again, as kind of a guide. We're going to need two strips, one on the outside and one on the inside. I'm going to use the panel lines again as kind of a guide, and that should help to get these pretty straight. So as you can see here, we have the blue tape used to fill up any excess spaces. We have the Tamiya tape, which is the nicer of the two tapes, used as our initial masking area, and I think it's looking pretty good. So now we just have to come back here, we have to shoot it with our paint, and I'm going to be using again Model Masters, the Metalizer paint, and we're going to be filling this up, priming the airbrush with a little bit of Model Masters airbrush thinner, and then we're going to come in here with the paint itself, and we're just going to make some light passes over the area. Now I can spray to my heart's content in the area now because I have masked off very thoroughly, burnished down all of the tape areas, and I shouldn't have any sort of overspray or runoff or anything like that. So we're just going to overcoat all the little areas, getting from the multiple angles, make sure that everything is covered, every nook and cranny. And once this is done, we can pretty much just strip off this masking and we can see how it looks. I want to be thorough. I want to make sure that everything is nice and clean. Now, if you wanted to, there are certain metalizer paints that you can actually burnish, and you can buff them out so they have a really, really bright sheen to it. This is one of those. I don't think I'll be doing that with this because I don't think it needs to be that bright. But, you know, it's good to know that you can if you so want to. Also, because this paint is notoriously thin and very difficult to work with if you're going to mask over it, I recommend doing this. It's one of the last steps you're going to be doing. So what we're going to do is after this is all dry, we're going to overcoat the entire thing with Future. and that should keep it sealed and closed. Yeah, it'll dull down the finish a little bit, but that's okay, because this is going to be an aircraft that's used in Vietnam, and we're going to put some gun dust around the 20mm cannon port, and most likely do a little weathering to make it look a little used, not too used. I don't like aircraft that are, you know, junky and ripped up and torn up and shredded. I like a well-kept and well-maintained aircraft. I prefer that. So pull this mask off. A couple areas we're going to have to take the X-Acto knife to and kind of pop off a little bit here. But overall, it's looking really good. There we go. All the masking is off. As you can see, we have a nice silver strip around the nose cone, and we have our gun port that is also silver as well. And that's it. I mean, we are pretty much ready for future. We have one other thing to paint, and that's just a simple fuel dumping valve here in the back. It's going to be red. But other than that, everything on this aircraft is painted, ready for future. Now, to save time, I'm going to overcoat this with future off camera, just so I have the initial paint finish protected with a layer of future. Future will take a few days to dry though, so I'll probably end up letting this dry thoroughly and curing before I cover it with future. And then I'll cover it with future probably in a couple of days and let that dry for a good week or so. So we're going to call it here. Thank you so much, guys, for watching. Next time we'll come back, we'll have this aircraft already futured and ready to go. Stay tuned for episode 16.